Wealth isn't what's in your pocket. It's what's in your mind. However, what is in your pocket can sometimes overshadow what is in your heart. In the big, shiny city of Ortelia, where skyscrapers reach for the stars and neon lights lit up the streets at night, two worlds existed that rarely crossed paths. One world was at the tops of skyscrapers, penthouses, clubs for the elite, private helicopters, and personal chefs. The other was basements, abandoned factories, night shelters, and markets where people traded not goods, but time, dignity, and hope. Lionel Bram, a billionaire and the owner of the international corporation Bramtech, an empire of innovation, artificial intelligence, and finance, lived in this city. He was a legend in the business world. At 24, he sold his first startup for $100 million. At 30, he became the owner of the largest bank in Eastern Europe. At 35, he negotiated with governments as an equal. The press called him the one who conquered time. He had everything: airplanes, islands, and even a clothing line with his initials. However, Lionel had one strange habit. He disappeared from his skyscraper for several hours every month. His personal driver knew only the coordinates of one of the poorest neighborhoods in Ortelia, an area where police rarely go and social services are afraid to enter without security. One evening, he stopped at an old factory that had long been home to the homeless. He got out of the car wearing dark jeans, an old jacket, and a hat. No one recognized him like this. He went deep into the basement, where three people were sitting on boxes. One of them was Max, a young man with intelligent eyes who always carried a notebook, a pen, and an old tablet in his grimy backpack. "You're here again," Max said quietly, not looking at Lionel. "I'm listening," the billionaire replied, sitting down next to Max. Max took out a notebook. It contained drawings, formulas, and diagrams of programs. He wasn't asking for money. He was sharing ideas. He dreamed of creating an app that would allow homeless people to register with the welfare system via voice request. No documents or address required. All they would need to say is, "I need help," and the system would determine their location and needs and transmit the request to social services. "If a person has a voice, he or she has a chance," Max said. Lionel turned the pages in silence. "It won't work," he said after a pause. "But I know how to make it work." And that was the end of their meeting. He left without leaving any money or promises. Max sighed. It wasn't the first time they had talked. It always ended the same way. The next day, Lionel sat on the 103rd floor of his glass tower, listening to analysts and advisors. But his thoughts were elsewhere. He remembered Max, his eyes, his words. If a man has a voice, he has a chance. It stuck in his head like a hook. He put everything else on hold. He summoned the chief AI developer to his desk. "I want to create a system that responds to the voice of someone in need of help. It would work offline, without authorization. No accounts, just a phrase, and the algorithm would know where to send it." "It's complicated and dangerous," the developer replied. "There will be a lot of abuse, fakes, and mistakes." "I know, but try it." Call the project Voice in the Dark. A few weeks later, Max was sitting in his usual spot when he heard someone call his name. "Max, is that you?" A woman dressed as a social worker stood in front of him. She was holding a tablet with his name, coordinates, and a brief description on the screen. "Needs temporary housing. Has a project related to voice assistance." "But I didn't send anything," he said, confused. "The system found us. By itself. It wasn't a mistake." That night, he slept in a warm room for the first time in months. He was allowed to work in a co-working space. He was given a regular tablet. One day, he received an invitation to Bramtech. Lionel met him himself in the conference room on the 100th floor. For the first time, he wasn't wearing a mask or a jacket. He was wearing a suit, but his eyes were still serious. "Your voice has done more than you know. Max, I want you to be the main advisor of the Voice in the Dark project." Max didn't answer right away. He just looked at the city below. Now he stood over it, not as a conqueror, but as someone who knows what darkness looks like from the inside. "I agree, but only on one condition." "What's that?" "We work not only for the city. We work for those who no one listens to. Lionel smiled. For the first time in many years, his smile was genuine. Meanwhile, in the basements and tunnels, amid the cardboard beds and despair, a voice whispered, "I need help." And, for the first time in a long time, the world heard. The Voice in the Dark project was gaining momentum. With Max's leadership and Lionel's financial support, the BramTech team worked around the clock. The system began integrating with city services, including social, medical, and law enforcement. Within a few months, the first results became apparent. People who had been living in the shadows for years were receiving help. Temporary housing, medical support, assistance with education, and employment. Crime rates in the poorest neighborhoods began to fall. Max became more than just a counselor. He became a symbol of change, bridging the gap between wealth and survival. However, not everyone welcomed this progress. A tense meeting was underway in BramTech's Strategic Investment Department. Men and women in expensive suits focused on the discussion instead of the city's nightscape. "This project threatens our interests," said Victor Dre, a stern middle-aged man. "If people from poor neighborhoods rise, we'll lose control over cheap labor and political influence. They'll get more resources." A young analyst tried to reassure him. "It will improve the corporation's reputation. People will see that we care." "Reputation won't pay the bills in New York," Victor huffed. "If we lose control, the stock will plummet. That's unacceptable." He showed a photo of young people using Max's program. "They need to be stopped," he declared. Meanwhile, in Max's neighborhood, skepticism about the new technology grew. "You don't understand," said Andre, a former homeless man and volunteer. "They want to appear helpful, but really, they're controlling us." "Control beats a night on the streets," Max replied. "Maybe, but what if the system shuts down tomorrow and you're back out there? Are you ready to be their toy?" Max was silent, pondering. At BramTech's heart, Lionel received a secret message. Part of the project encryption code protecting users' voice data had been stolen. If it fell to competitors or hackers, the consequences would be dire. "It's sabotage," Lionel told his assistant. "Someone wants the project to fail." "But who?" she asked. "Those who resist change, those who believe power belongs only to the rich." Danger loomed. That night, in his modest suburban office, Max called Lionel. "We're at the end of our rope," he said. "Without the code, the system will stop." "I know," Lionel said calmly. "We have to protect it. And you, what do we do? You are the project's most valuable asset. Your knowledge and voice are priceless. They want to break the system, but they can't break you. But they can try to break me. That's why I'm offering you a different life, safe, with resources to keep fighting." Max listened in silence. The next morning, he received an official invitation to move to BramTech headquarters, where conditions, protection, and resources awaited him. Meanwhile, Andre and activists organized a protest against the corporation, believing technology was a tool of manipulation. Max stood torn between a new life with security and his loyalty to those who trusted him and sought justice. Upstairs, Victor Dre plotted his final move. If they want change, they'll have it, but on our terms. Under his control, cyber attacks began. Failures started affecting users. Lionel realized this was the start of a war where the cost of a vote was far higher than simple assistance. Two people met in a conference room, a government representative and a representative of a new era. "You have influence," Victor began, "but you don't know the true price of power. And you don't know the price of hope," Max replied. Victor proposed a compromise. BramTech would leave the project, but retain partial control and supervision. Max realized that idealism is good, but the world is not black and white. They signed an agreement that marked the beginning of a new stage. Since then, the Voice in the Dark project has begun to revive. There were new rules and more openness, as well as strict control over abuse. Max remained a symbol of hope. Now, however, he knew that the real struggle was not to defeat the enemy, but to find a balance between light and shadow. In one of the city's poor neighborhoods, Andre stood on the edge of the street and watched the sunrise. "Light doesn't come right away," he said to himself. "But when it does, it changes everything." Max was looking at the same sunrise and felt that their journey had just begun.